Listen to me, Ifunanya. You have 30 days to reduce your weight or you will leave my house. When David met Ifunanya, she was a radiant burst of laughter in a world that often felt too serious. She was soft, curvy, and had a heart warmer than the evening sun. David loved everything about her. Her infectious joy, her kindness, and the way she cooked his favorite nkwobi just the way he liked it. Ifunanya was on the plus side, yes, but David never saw it as a problem. Their wedding was beautiful, a grand celebration that left their friends envious. They were the perfect couple, or so it seemed. But love, as Ifunanya would later learn, is sometimes only as deep as a man's appetite for newness. 18 months into their marriage, things began to change. The first time David made a snide remark about her weight, she laughed it off. Ifunanya, don't you think you should start going to the gym? I mean, you're already big before, but now you are taking it to another level. She chuckled, thinking it was just playful teasing. But the remarks continued. David one day said, "See how Nicole, my secretary at the office, is looking fresh and slim. My dear, you need to step up." Ifunanya frowned, and she said to her husband, "David, what are you trying to say?" "I'm just saying a little effort won't kill you," David replied nonchalantly. One day at the office, David sat frozen in his chair, his pen hovering uselessly over the document as Nicole glided towards him, her slim figure swaying with effortless grace. The soft click of her heels against the tiled floor sent a shiver up his spine. But it was her seductive smile that truly unraveled him. Her glossy lips parted slightly, revealing perfect white teeth. And for a moment, he forgot the stack of files she placed before him. The faint smell of her perfume lingered in the air as she leaned in just enough for him to catch a glimpse of her delicate curve of her collarbone. His heartbeat drummed loudly in his ears. Signing papers had never felt this intoxicating. David had been captivated by Nicole, his secretary, for months. She was slim with long straight legs that carried her with the confidence of a runway model. The way she laughed at his jokes, the way she called him sir, with a playful twinkle in her eyes, it all made him feel powerful. In his mind, he always compared Nicole's beauty to that of his wife, and the more he compares, the more he gets disgusted with his wife, Ifunanya. One evening, David came home late, reeking of perfume that wasn't Ifunanya's. She asked him where he had been, and he waved her off with a lazy excuse. "I am working hard to provide for us, Ifunanya. Must you question everything?" David barked. But deep down, she knew. She knew the way a woman knows when her husband is no longer hers. The insults became crueler. He started openly comparing her directly to Nicole. "Do you even look at yourself in the mirror? Women are losing weight in 30 days, but you're only getting bigger like an elephant," he shouted at her one evening. It was one thing for a husband to cheat. It was another for him to use his infidelity as a weapon against his wife. One night, after another argument, he dropped the bombshell. "Ifunanya, you have 30 days to lose weight or I am divorcing you. I am serious. I have seen women on TikTok who lost weight in 1 month. So don't tell me it's impossible." Ifunanya gasped, her heart shattering into pieces. "David, you can't be serious. Losing weight that fast isn't even healthy." "You are just looking for excuses," David shouted at her. "I deserve better than a fat wife. If you want to save this marriage, better lose weight in 30 days or you can keep getting fat like an ugly pig." Ifunanya was speechless. This was the man who once swore he would love her forever. She confided in her best friend, Amaka, who was furious. "Ifunanya, don't kill yourself for a man who doesn't value you. Lose weight if you want, but not for this foolish 30 days ultimatum. With a broken heart, Ifunanya embarked on a desperate weight loss journey. She followed diet plans, ran on empty stomachs, and nearly fainted more times than she can count. She was exhausted, mentally and physically. But no matter how much she tried, 30 days was not enough. When the deadline came, David barely looked at her effort. "You are still fat," he said bluntly. "I can't do this anymore. Pack your things and leave." He kicked her out just like that. Ifunanya found herself standing outside, her bags beside her, her heart shattered beyond repair. She had given this man everything, and he had discarded her like she was nothing. Her mother welcomed her with open arms. "Wipe your tears, my daughter. A man who cannot love you for who you are does not deserve you." Days turned to weeks, weeks into months. Ifunanya channeled her pain into self-improvement, not just physically, but mentally. She focused on herself, on healing. Slowly, steadily, she began to lose weight, not to please a man, but for herself. Her confidence blossomed. She got a good job and moved out of her mother's house, standing tall as a woman who had rediscovered her worth. But she had no idea that karma was preparing a banquet for David. David stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, but he wasn't looking at his reflection. He was staring at Nicole, who was lying lazily on the bed, scrolling through her phone with the disinterest of a woman who had gotten everything she wanted. Once she had been his fantasy, now she was his nightmare. It had been a year and a half since he married her, a decision that once felt like winning the lottery. But instead of marital bliss, he had inherited a wife who monitored his every move like a detective on a murder case. Nicole, the same woman he once admired for her beauty and charm, had turned into an obsessive, controlling wife. She checked his phone daily. She followed him to work unexpectedly. She even hired someone to spy on him because, as she once said, "If you could cheat on your first wife with me, what stops you from cheating on me too?" David scoffed as he grabbed his briefcase. It was morning, but he was already exhausted, both physically and mentally. Marriage with Nicole was nothing like he imagined. He had left a loving, peaceful wife for a woman who made life a living hell. And yet, it was about to get worse. David had been ignoring the nagging thoughts in his head for months. The thought that his son, their 1-year-old baby, didn't look like him. But he had convinced himself that not all children resemble their fathers. Until the day he walked into their bedroom after he missed his flight to Abuja. Nicole was on the phone, lying on the bed as usual, and she said over the phone, "I told you, stop calling me, stop blackmailing me. David can't know that the baby is not his child." David let out a scream in shock. Nicole spun round, her face draining of color. "Who are you talking to?" David's voice was deadly serious. "Nobody," she said too quickly. He stepped forward. "You just said that the baby isn't mine. Am I hearing things?" Nicole tried to laugh it off. "David, you are being paranoid." His eyes darkened. "Nicole, if you lie to me one more time." "Fine, fine," she screamed. "You want the truth? The child isn't yours. Are you happy now?" A thick, suffocating silence fell on the room. David's heart pounded against his ribs. His world cracked open. "You mean to tell me that all this while I have been raising another man's child?" His voice trembled with rage. Nicole folded her arms and replied nonchalantly, "You are too stupid to figure it out before now." Something in David's brain snapped. He lunged at her, but before he could touch her, Nicole turned and bolted into the closet. slamming the door shut just in time. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone, quickly dialing her real boyfriend. And she said, "Baby, please come over. David wants to kill me." David pounded on the door, his anger growing with every second. "Nicole, open this door before I break it down," he shouted. Minutes later, the screech of tires announced the arrival of Nicole's boyfriend. Without hesitation, the boyfriend stormed into the room, his fist already cocked. The moment David turned around, a thunderous blow landed on his jaw, sending him crashing into the desk. Blow after blow rained down until David lay groaning on the floor. "Touch her again and I'll make you regret it," Nicole's boyfriend shouted before grabbing Nicole's hand and storming out, leaving David bruised and humiliated. Before David could process it, Nicole and her lover packed her bags and took the child and left. David lay there, bleeding, broken, betrayed. He had destroyed his marriage with a good woman like Ifunanya for this Jezebel. Karma wasn't just knocking, it had kicked his door down. News of David's misfortune spread like wildfire. His performance at the office suffered. His once vibrant charm had withered into bitterness. The company executives noticed, and soon they called him in. "David, we are letting you go." His heart stopped. "Sir, please, I need this job." His boss sighed. "You used to be one of our best employees. Now you are distracted, unreliable. We can't afford to keep you." David left the office that day with nothing. No job, no money, no family. Just a suitcase of regrets. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. He roamed the streets of Lagos, hungry and tired, looking for jobs that weren't there. Then one fateful afternoon, under the scorching sun, he saw her, Ifunanya. She was walking out of a cafe, looking breathtakingly beautiful. She had lost weight, but not in a desperate, unhealthy way. Her body exuded confidence. Her skin glowed. Her aura was powerful. She looked nothing like the woman he had thrown out of the house. She looked healthy. She looked happy. David hid behind a car, ashamed. He wanted to run to her, to tell her how sorry he was, but the words choked him. He watched as she got into her sleek car and drove off. But hunger was an enemy of pride. A few weeks later, David swallowed his shame and called Ifunanya. "Hello?" Ifunanya said. The sound of her voice nearly brought him to tears. "Ifunanya, it's me, David." Silence, then a cold, "What do you want?" "Please, I need to see you, just once," David said. There was hesitation. Then she replied, "Fine, but don't expect anything from me." David arrived at her apartment, his clothes hanging loosely on his thin frame. His eyes were sunken, his once confident posture reduced to that of a beggar. Ifunanya opened the door, looking even more stunning up close. She didn't look at him with hatred, just indifference, which hurt even more. He fell to his knees. "Ifunanya, please forgive me. I was a fool. You were the best thing in my life, and I threw it all away. I lost my job. Nicole ruined me. She left me for another man. I have nothing. Please give me another chance." Ifunanya sighed, arms folded, and she replied, "David, when you kicked me out, did you think this day would come? That you will ever kneel before me?" "Ifunanya, I was blind. Please, please." "Stand up," she cut him off. "It's too late." David's eyes widened, and he said frantically, "No, Ifunanya, please, forgive me, please." She looked at him and said, "I am engaged. I have moved on." David's throat tightened. "Ify, I love you." She shook her head. "No, You loved the idea of me when it was convenient. You never truly valued me." David cried and asked, "What do I do now?" She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "Live with the consequences of your choices." And with that, she closed the door. David stood there, broken beyond repair. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to lose something priceless. David stood in front of Ifunanya's door long after she had closed it in his face. He had no strength left to knock again, no words left to beg. He simply stood there, staring at the wooden door, hoping it would magically open and undo the past. But it didn't. Eventually, the security guard approached him. "Oga beg, they go. Madam, no one see you." David swallowed hard and nodded. He turned away, each step heavier than the last. He had nowhere to go, nothing to return to. His entire world had collapsed, and the one person who could have saved him had moved on. The streets of Lagos were unkind to a man who had fallen from grace. The very roads he once drove through in his sleek company car, looking down on pedestrians, now saw him wandering on foot, his stomach empty, his heart even emptier. His friends, they had disappeared the moment he lost his job. His family had warned him against Nicole, so he was too ashamed to go back to them. And yet, nothing was as painful as the realization that he had thrown away something priceless. Ifunanya had loved him. She had been loyal, kind, and patient. And what had he done? He had humiliated her, thrown her out like trash, all because he had been blinded by lust for a woman who had used him and discarded him like a piece of trash. This was his reality now, a life without Ifunanya. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. David struggled to find work, but his name had been tainted in the industry. He went from one failed interview to another, each rejection dragging him deeper into despair. Then one afternoon, fate decided to break him even further. He was job hunting and walking through Victoria Island when he saw her again. Ifunanya was coming out of a fancy restaurant, laughing softly at something her fiancé had said. The man beside her was everything David wasn't: tall, confident, and successful. He kissed her as he opened the car door for her, and she slipped inside with a grace that stabbed at David's heart. He clenched his fist, forcing back tears. That could have been me. That should have been me. As the car drove off, David finally admitted to himself he had lost her forever. One evening, after another failed job hunt, David sat in a bar, sipping a cheap drink, his head heavy with sorrow. He had grown thinner, his once sharp features now hollow with suffering. A man sat beside him, an acquaintance from his office days. "David, look at you. What happened?" David chuckled bitterly and replied, "My guy, since I lost my job, I lost everything." His colleague at his former working place sighed and asked, "What about your ex-wife, Ifunanya? Are you in contact with her?" David looked away and replied, "She is happy now with someone else." The man shook his head. "She was a good wife to you." David closed his eyes and replied, "I know." Silence stretched between them before the man spoke again. "You know what your problem is." David turned to him and asked, "What is it?" And the man replied, "You didn't realize her worth until she was gone. You wanted a fantasy, but you had a queen, and now you have lost her." David's eyelid moved rapidly, blinking back tears. He had nothing left but regret. One night, he sat in his small, dark room, staring at his reflection in a broken mirror. He didn't recognize himself anymore. Gone was the arrogant, self-assured man who once thought he had the whole world at his feet. In his place was a man broken by his own choices. David sighed deeply, whispering to himself, "I destroyed my own happiness." As he lay back on his tattered mattress, staring at the ceiling, he finally understood the lesson life had tried to teach him. A good woman is not to be discarded like an old cloth. Love should never be taken for granted.